BulkLoads Podcast, your number one resource for everything bulk freight trucking.
All right, that's the concept.
Hey guys, Jared Flinn with the BulkLoads Podcast. Got Tyler in here with me.
What's going on?
It's a different angle.
Yeah, it is. Got a new setup going on.
It feels a little awkward.
Yeah. Dude, it's like we got the Joe Rogan setup going on.
I feel like this is just personal space. But like, don't play footsies with me.
We're not in a podcast. We're just talking, Jared.
That's
Yeah.
So, well, we always like to change things up. So yeah, this is a little bit different angle, hopefully to give the experience of our listener and viewer a little bit better of our podcast. But yeah, welcome on to the BulkLoads Podcast. As always, when we get started, we want to feature a truck. And Tyler, I'll let you kick it off.
This week, we'll feature AHT Trucking, BulkLoads member since 2020, Stephanie Unruh out of Galva, Kansas. Man, they got some beautiful trucks. Pull pneumatics and hoppers. I really like this picture after. I always like the pictures after they clean the trucks, and like you can see the wash in the background. But yeah, that pneumatic is just super shiny, and they were actually at the conference.
Yeah, I'll speak a little bit on that. And Joe, yeah, if you also throw up the picture of Stephanie and her husband, but got to sit with them and talk to him. Buddy Ballman on our side, one of our employees, he's been out there visiting him, and he told me a little bit about their backstory. And then she came to the conference, and we talked for like a half hour or so, but she's got just an amazing story, grew up in trucking, then went out and started her own. Her and her husband also have a tow truck company, which, we've had Robert Brackett on talk about tow trucks, but like she gave us a different angle about, hopefully maybe she'll be graciously to come on the podcast, but that's a whole different arena when you get into tow truck operators and all that. And it's a vital need for the industry, but like, they're making it harder for tow truck companies to survive as well.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, you got to have it. If there's an accident on the road or just you need a tow, it's a crucial part. But yeah, there's another side of that business that she was telling me about, and maybe we'll showcase that.
Yeah, explore that in a podcast. Speaking of the conference, we're actually going to upload all the conference photos. We're going to get them on the conference website. So if you were there at the conference and you want to see some of those photos, download them, post them on socials. We'd love to get those to you. I think the easiest way is just go to bulkfreightconference.com. We'll have a tab on there that says photos, and you can find the ones that you're in. We got a lot of good footage that Joe captured, and we'll have all those so you can download. Also, if you were not able to make the conference, but you got a little FOMO and you're like, what actually went on here? You can actually go on the conference website, and we'll have photos and videos on there as well.
Yeah, we're still talking about the highs of the conference and still getting emails and threads and postings from people. And so, yeah, if you didn't make it this year, we will send out dates probably soon with next year's dates for you to plan accordingly. We know that it's probably going to get bigger, and we'll probably have to cap tickets out. So we definitely want you there.
Yep.
So, well, speaking of the conference, Jesse Runions spoke at the conference. He gave an industry report.
Yep.
We've had Jesse on numerous times. We think his information is super valuable. So wanted to bring him on a little bit of a controversial subject, talking about mega carriers coming into the bulk space. And I think you all know the one that we're talking about here recently, but we know that in my career, I've witnessed probably a half a dozen or more big mega carriers getting in the bulk space. And we've seen just a lot of, I guess, just comments and content and thoughts of what people think about this, and, whether they should be fearful when you have a big mega carrier getting into the bulk space, or is this a time, does it present opportunities?
Yeah, that's what I'm excited about for this specific episode that Jesse talks about is, we see him on our BulkLoads forum, everybody talking about it. But also I'm part of all these Facebook groups, Jared, I know you are too, bulk haulers and stuff, to where that's been a huge topic of conversation. So we wanted to cover it and bring him on, but I'm excited to get into Jesse talking about why, what prompted them to get into the bulk industry, and what does it mean for everybody else?
And I think more importantly, and you'll see this, we'll talk about this at the end, but what can we learn about this? Everything we do, there's a learning opportunity about this, and Jesse's going to point out some of those highlights. So with that said, here is my conversation with the freight wizard, Jesse Runions. Jesse, welcome back on the show.
As always, it's good to be here.
Yeah.
I wore my jacket.
Yeah. Well, first off, thank you for coming to the Bulk Freight Conference, but also all the time that you took into doing the research and really giving us a good industry outlook.
Well, it was a little bit of work, but shoot, I'm going to be before a big crowd. I better have my homework done.
Yeah. Well, for those that miss the Bulk Freight Conference, talk about, and we just talked about a little bit, like there's been, I mean, it's a little bit old news now, but a lot of these earnings have came out from larger trucking companies, and I'm not saying it's doom and gloom, but it's pretty grim.
Grim is probably an overstatement, but it's what 2024 looks to be a continuation of 2023, at least until July. That's the big issue right now. You're not going to see a consumer demand upturn. 2021 to 2023 was a one-off anomaly because, hey, the federal government dumped a total of $6 trillion in the economy. It burned a hole in a lot of pockets. They spent a lot of money. Now that money is pulling back in to pulling out of the monetary supply thanks to interest rate increases. And I guess into fractional reserve banking, how they create money and evaporate money, if you will.
Yeah.
So now we're back to a normal, albeit a new normal. And they talk about the retailers' inventories. Well, households have inventories too. How many TV sets are you going to have in your house at one time? How long is it going to be before those TV sets go out? Mm-hmm. So durable goods probably will take a hit for the next 4 to 5 years. And there's two drivers for trucking, and it affects each niche differently: manufacturing and single households or single home sales, new homes being built by a single family. They're putting stuff in it. Mm-hmm. They're putting food in it. You know, eventually they get a kid, a dog, pet food, or if they live in the countryside, livestock, poultry.
Yeah.
So what everybody that pays attention to trucking right now, the two biggest things that they're looking at for future growth in terms of consumer demand are those two categories: the growth of single-family homes and manufacturing. Manufacturing right now is flat or even declining domestically, even though you have a record number of imports because China's subsidizing their manufacturers to make things cheaper, mm-hmm. to try to reclaim their market share they've lost in the last 4 years. Even though you have more imports, manufacturing is where it is domestically. So that's probably not going to grow. Consumer demand is probably going to stay about where it is right now. So the only thing that's going to turn rates is carrier attrition. You know, trucking companies going out of business because there's still a record number of companies compared to what there were 4 to 5 years ago.
Yeah, and I didn't ask you about this prior. Do you know how many that is? I mean,
it's hard to quantify.
But we're still like we're still more than pre-COVID levels.
Yes, right? We are. And that has not stabilized yet. And as I, when you look at monetary supply between the beginning of the pandemic, 2020, February of 2020 to roughly January 21, mm-hmm. the federal government dumped $4 trillion into the economy. Most of it went direct or somewhat direct to the consumer, so that kept our economy going. Then another $2 trillion between 2021 and the peak of 22, and of course that's when the Fed Reserve started increasing interest rates. At that point, you can go look at trucking freight rates, and you can see the same decline. So yeah, trucking in a lot of ways is directly tied to monetary supply. So if there's more money out there chasing more goods, then more goods have to move, and there you go.
And we look at some of these earnings that came out last month from J.B. Hunt, Warner, these publicly traded companies that you can see the financials. I mentioned, Swift, Knight, but I mean, they're all related to consumer, mm-hmm. Consumer purchasing.
Yeah. And J.B. Hunt making noise is probably more significant than others because their truckload segment is not their biggest segment of revenue. Multimodal or intermodal.
Yeah.
and dedicated is their two biggest revenue segments, and they're still taking a hit in all three right now. So that tells you that consumer demand is not returned to the way we would like it to be. So
I know Shelley Simpson, the CEO, I know she'd come out and mention some, but I didn't know if you saw that article or whatever. When are they, these big companies that have billions of dollars in assets and all this, like, are they seeing the same thing? Maybe July being.
That's what they're hoping. That's what we're all hoping. It could be longer. If carrier capacity hangs on like it's been hanging on, because I honestly expected to see a turn in that capacity where, a noticeable dip by now. That's not really materialized. So a lot of companies, all that extra money they made, they put it back smartly. And in some ways, the cost factors to a trucking company have not changed since the peak of the pandemic. So you got these lowering rates in your face, but you're still under the same cost pressures. In talking about the bigger carriers, even Knight/Swift said that they have quit taking on loads that are unsustainable to maintain their operations, contract and spot.
Wow.
So when you got a mega carrier that can get away with the head haul and the back haul, as they call it, taking the really low ball back haul rate that might pay the fuel, and they're saying we can't do it anymore, that should turn some heads. Yeah. Because eventually, whether it's big carriers or small carriers, eventually there's going to be a tipping point, and you're going to see it. And now the danger is, the longer it goes with an overcapacity issue, is a sudden drop in capacity. So then you have a lot less trucks on the road, and then you have pandemic-like conditions, except there's less trucks out there to service the shippers. That's the real danger for 2024 going into 25, is right now we're oversupplied, then a rapid cliff, and then radically undersupplied, which is great for the carriers, though, because they'll be able to, it'll be 22, 21 all over again. You can pick up the phone and asked to go anywhere for pretty much name your rate.
Yeah. I can think about when my Bartlett days was 2008, but that was happening, but like all these carriers were dropping off.
Yes.
And like, this was my kind of first chance in trucking, trying to understand what's going on. And I was frightened at the fact that, like, are there going to be any truckers left? I mean, that wasn't my mindset. Like, who's going to fill, or like next year when we have freight to move, who's going to fill this? We know the laws of supply and demand come back into it. But yeah, we could almost get too much of attrition or too many out, and then we'll be.
And for the bulk commodity segment, one trend I've noticed for about the past 6 to 8 months, railroads getting a bigger market share. These food producers don't have to produce on such a tight timeline like they did during the pandemic. So they can put that on rail. They're not in danger of running out of corn or out of soybean meal or any other ingredient. They can put it on the rail and deliver it, at a much cheaper rate. Or, a pet food producer can get it via rail that delivers less than 20 miles down the road. Then they put it on a truck, and they're still coming out cheaper. So not only do you have the same cost pressures, a lowering rate structure, you're also facing increased competition from rail. And that's the reason, because even though we don't do spot, we pay attention to the boards. Yep. That's the reason you see a lot less available loads on the board, is not because it's not being produced, but because it's being put on a rail car.
Wow. Hey guys, I hope you're enjoying this podcast with Jesse Runions. Hey, just wanted to let you know the economy is still struggling right now. I was talking with a trucking executive the other day, and they're saying that we are looking at a recession levels like back in 2008. And if you were back in 2008, you can remember there were over 4 million Americans laid off. So we know that there's still going to be a rocky road ahead of us in this trucking cycle. We hear from companies all the time that cash flow is getting tight, rates are low. We are here for you, smartfreightfunding.com. Check us out. If you need help or want to make sure that you are cash flow positive, reach out to us. We want to make sure that you are cash positive. We know, as Jesse have said on previous podcasts,
a lot of times business success relies on cash flow, not necessarily profitability, but cash flow. But if you need help, reach out to us, smartfreightfunding.com. We will help you with your cash flow. God bless.
Talk about the operating ratio. Have you seen where most of these companies are? Some of these mega ones, do they publicly put that?
Most of the ones I've seen, they hope to be in the 90% range, which is where most companies are right now. Ideally,
What's favorable?
85. And then your non-trucking ratio should be around 10% of whatever you're running. So if you're running 90, it should be over 9%. So, that's your support staff, your dispatchers, your safety, et cetera, or your bulk load subscription.
Yeah, for sure.
But all of the non-trucking revenue should never be more than 10%. Really, you want to be in the 8% range. So if you're at 90%, which is not optimal, you don't want to be at, you want to be able to pull at least a 2% net.
Yeah. Wow. Those are razor thin margins.
Well, trucking's always been pennies on the dollar, except in specific niches.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's move on. And I wanted you just to give us a little recap of the market. A lot of our listeners love hearing that. I hear that all the time. I want to transition into the topic I'd kind of talked to you about previously and kind of why you're in here. And we'll kind of see where this navigates or where we move about this. There's been a lot of talk about a mega carrier here in this town, Springfield, jumping into hopper freight. And we see those that are on social media, a lot of social media posts about it. I've seen posts where people are taking pictures and seeing them at this plant or this place and this place. And I'm going to give you my thoughts. And again, this is, kind of our thought process behind this. So take it kind of however you will. But I want to kind of clear the air and just kind of give our take on this. And I know this will be very opinionated. But let's start with that. I guess I'll start the stage. I guess when I had heard news about this, did some research, and actually I think I read some of their posts, but the reason they really got into hopper freight, Prime we're talking about, was they were already servicing some pet food manufacturers, is from what I heard. And these pet food manufacturers said, hey, can you service us on the dry bulk side or the hopper side? I think they were servicing them, on the liquid side.
What we got on our end, and of course, the trucking world, to get your salt shaker.
Yeah, this is speculative.
They were also servicing Bunge with their tank division, I'm assuming with biofuel production. And essentially the same story. Because when it first came out, they were going to get 100 hoppers from Wilson. And then they were going to get 50. And then then the last thing you heard, they put 25 hoppers on that lane that they were specifically servicing. So it looks like they did some market research and, hey, we probably don't want to dump any more money in this. We have to, because everybody else has been jumping into hopper, just like, people jumping from van into hopper, reefer into hopper, flatbed. It's actually becoming an oversupplied segment. So all we're doing is jumping into the frying pan, into the fire. So they're in the ball game, but they are not making as big a splash as they initially were going to. Because when you commit to 100 hoppers, you're committing to making at least, it's got to gross at least 15 to 20 million to break even, depending on how their cost outlays are. So they scaled it back. You can kind of see how much money they were anticipating making in entering this segment. So my opinion is, okay, a big company's got in here, but it doesn't make a difference. And there's two reasons for that.
Well, before you answer that, how is this, and maybe this will be the answer to that, like in my career in bulk trucking, I've seen this happen with other companies. I've seen Warner, for example, jump into hopper freight. I think I've seen JB Hunt jump into it. There's another one I can't think of the name of, but like, why has this one created a bigger splash than some of these other larger trucking companies, in your opinion?
Prime has a controversial reputation. If you go look at their owner-operator purchase program, where you go from company driver to owner-operator, I don't know. I don't see their financials, so I don't want to speak to that. But there are many that think that they have predatory practices. I think probably a big portion of that, and I forget who it was that was discussing truck leases. A big portion of that is people not doing their homework before getting in the game. So they go in with unrealistic expectations of what a being an owner operator is, much less a lease operator under a carrier. And, you're seeing these big paychecks, so you don't put anything back for maintenance, any other cost outlay, your tires, even if they're paying your $22.90, your tags and whatnot, you still got taxes, come April 15th or October 15th, depending on how you file. So I think a lot of the problem from that reputation comes with people not anticipating the problems of trucking. So you have that, and then they are a big player. So when people, when I came into trucking, JB Hunt, Swift, and Snyder were the big villains in trucking. And the simple fact is, even if you got shareholder cash coming in, a truck still costs a lot of money to move down the road. And if you're not making money, you're going out of business. So they've had to keep their rates somewhere to make that money. But perceptions, how you perceive something is sometimes more important than the reality.
Yeah. So back to, and I interrupted you, what were the two reasons you think they really jumped into this?
Well, one, diversification of revenue stream. Hopper is a different animal in trucking. It's not a date-specific segment or hour-specific segment. Hey, we need this load of soybean meal to deliver on the 14th or, the 30th or before the 30th. Or, hey, we're giving you 50 loads of fertilizer. We need to have these delivered before May 1st. So you're not scheduling for a precise appointment on Saturday morning, April the 20th at 5 a.m. You have all this latitude. Another reason I think they might have had unrealistic expectations of what this segment will make. Part of the biggest thing when you come from van or reefer, getting into bulk commodity, especially hopper, by and large, it's a banker's hours segment. You're not going to run teams in a hopper truck because the operating hours of the receivers and the shippers aren't there. Mm-hmm. So it's a Monday through Friday business hour operation by and large, with, a little bit of exception on either end of the day. So they're going to have some interesting adjustments learning how hopper works. And again, a new segment is a new revenue opportunity. So it comes down to money. They think they can make money doing this, and the customer asked them if they would.
I've said this before, and I'll ask you this question. I don't think you don't see a lot of big hopper companies out there. And
there's a reason for that. The main reason is you have roughly we'll call it a 60 to 84-hour operating window during Monday through Friday. How many people receive on the weekends? Except for the big mega producers like Nestle or something, it don't happen.
This is speculative, but I almost wonder, and I'll let you comment on this, but this idea probably came from them. Maybe it was years before, but I would assume this was during the pandemic. We had a short supply chain. Everybody was running into issues getting product in. I imagine pet food manufacturers were the same with everybody else. A lot of them, that can actually be a little more time sensitive versus, a big grain terminal or fertilizer port or something like that. Do you think maybe that like these pet food manufacturers more reached out to them saying, hey, you guys are serving us here. We need better help.
Right now, that's a possibility. They might be trying to lock up capacity before the next upturn. It's coming. It may be further away than we want, but there'll be another consumer demand upturn. So they may be locking in capacity. They may be looking for a cheaper venue. And another trend that we're seeing from shippers is they want a carrier that's more 3PL oriented. Or on a podcast, I heard about a carrier or individual owner operator as a carrier saying he called somebody and they wanted 5 trucks or he couldn't haul a load. They're wanting a more 3PL, so where they make one phone call versus 5 phone calls. Say, hey, I got 5 loads, going to work. Can you handle this for you? They want a dedicated capacity. A lot of it comes from labor shortage. Just as everybody, in trucking has a problem finding new people in the truck or in the office, so do the shippers. So they're trying to get done more for less or less effort.
The other thing too, I always think about, and I don't want to just beat this to a dead horse or beat a dead horse on this, but the pet food industry continues to accelerate. A lot of people don't realize, and I can't remember that last stat. I mean, it used to be an 80 billion, now over 120 billion. I mean, but like people are paying more and more for their pets. I mean, pet food and all that product. But like, I wonder if that industry has just gotten so big. Think about COVID. Now they went and bought all these pets because they were isolated by themselves. But it just seems like, and I always raise our hand, like we are one of those families, like, we pay $100 for a bag of dog food. I never in my life, I grew up Olroy dog food for $5, 50-pound bag at Walmart. But now we feed our 2 pets this grain feed. But it's like, could that be it? They just see that there's a big demand that's going to continue to accelerate.
Probably. I mean, I'm probably that demographic that helps this segment of the economy grow. When you become a cynical old man, you tend to spend more money on your little dog than other more amorous adventures. So I can see this. But yeah, pet food is going to grow for a whole host of reasons. Part of it speaks to how strong our economy is. Even the most irresponsible person, when they get a pet, they're going to want to feed their dog.
Yep.
So that kind of is a good indicator to the affluence of our economy as a whole. How long that lasts is a whole different, ball game, and you can get one opinion on either end of the spectrum. But that is a good economic indicator in the longer term. People feel confident enough to get a pet for whatever reason, whether it's just to have a dog so I can post them on Instagram all the time, or, for a companion. Hey, look at it this way. Your dog's never going to ask you for money. So who are you going to spend the most money on?
Right. Oh, that's so good. You said earlier that you shouldn't see this as a threat to your business.
No.
Talk about that.
One, how many hopper loads are out there? Even at Prime, Rob Lowe had an epiphany tomorrow morning and said, you know what? I'm converting my whole fleet to hoppers. How? That's not
8,000 or however many.
Yes, that's not even. It probably doesn't even bump 1% of the loads moving out there. So, and 25, 50, 100, whatever it is, the hoppers, that's not going to impact anybody's mainline revenue if they're providing solid service to their customers. Service is always going to sell over price, even if somebody snatches a load out from under you. As soon as that lowball carrier does one of 2 things: consistent service failures, or they go out of business because they bid it too cheap. Whose phone is going to ring? That carrier that serviced the customer to their fullest expectations. Service will always sell over price. But don't get me wrong, the underbid aspect or the threat of it, hey, that is concerning. But again, as a small carrier, we ran into the underbidding thing long before Prime has come around, and we will run into it again with or without Prime. And so long as we are blessed to keep on going, we're going to outperform anybody that underbids us. And I'm pretty sure that's true of every carrier or independent contractor out there. It has the same level of pride in the product they provide their customer.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so good. You kind of answered this question. I'll just reframe it another way. I look at everything as a learning experience. Like when you go through hardship or, bad economy or something in life, like what, you always look down the road, what I learned from this. But like for owner operators out there listening to this, maybe they've been very cynical about this or worried. Maybe there's a threat though. What can we learn about this experience to apply to our own operation?
The biggest thing is consistency of service. And I'll kind of jump to another trend that we've noticed probably 20% approaching of our customers are wanting more status updates on where their load is at. That's something that is carrying over from van and reefer that are more time sensitive. So, know where the load is. The shipper has realized that, hey, if I can track my pair of new socks and get an hourly update, I should be able to do it for that, $10,000, $50,000 load. I should be able to get a status update on this.
Yeah.
So you're going to see more of that come along. So, just to make a little plug here, whether it's TMS.
I know. I was going to plug it if you were.
Or I'll even plug Sean McCarty or US Cellular's and My Fleet Tractors. You might, if you don't have them now and you don't plan on getting them in the near future, that is something every small company may want to explore, and it's cheap.
Yeah, and be proactive about it. Don't wait for your shipper to ask for that. Let them know that, hey, this is another service I provide by working with you as a customer.
And be more like a 3PL. And this is probably one of the reasons we have our highest customer retention. Look for problems before they happen.
Yeah.
Or, because you're going to build a relationship with your shipper contacts, they have a problem trying to get a carrier for a load, even if it's not in your lane. If there's somebody in your call list that might service that lane for them, direct them to it. They're going to remember that. Do your best to service that customer in aspects beyond just picking a load up and delivering it whenever you get there. Try to make sure they have a good feeling and knowledge about the product that they're putting on your truck.
Yeah. Yeah. So good. This is going to lead me into where we're going to camp out next and probably end on this. But one thing that we get feedback from shipper, we listen to our members, and like a lot of times we're, complaining about this person, that person, complaining about the shipper, the broker, the carrier, whatever. But one feedback that we actually got from one of our shippers and brokers was like better communication from carriers, specifically on the load board when they said, we may post a load on there, we're advertising this load on your service on BulkLoads. And a lot of times we'll get like a 3-word question on it, inquiry. We'll get a carrier who we've never dealt with, never talked to, and it'll be like, what's the rate? But they have no idea who this carrier is, where they're based out of, when they can take the load. I guess my point is, and I want to just bring this up because I want to try to help carriers. And I think we're all salesmen. We're all trying to sell our service. BulkLoads, I'm trying to sell our service here. When you're interacting on there and you're working with a client, remember, as a carrier, that shipper or broker, they are the customer. They're going to be, they're paying you to provide a service.
Probably, again, the best paying loads are not because you're got a prettier truck or all these gee whiz gadgets. The best paying loads come as a result of good relationships. So if we see a load, and providing that there's some brokers that won't put a phone contact, they'll put an email. But if there's a phone number, that first contact to a broker should be a telephone call. Hey, hi, I'm this guy. And a lot of times, and this is something we're seeing from carrying over from the bigger industries, the first thing they ask you is what's your MC number or your DOT number. Have it written right there on your dashboard. Put that little sticky note with your MC and your US DOT. So they can look you up. They can see your safer score. They can see how many accidents you've been in, what your out of service rate. Shippers are starting to look at that. Even though there's been 2 decisions that have went either to the appeals and the Supreme Court is kind of taking brokers off the hook. We know the deal. Somebody gets hurt and they see a big signboard on the truck. It turns out that trucking company doesn't have enough insurance or they don't have enough money in the bank if they're going big. Who are they going to go after next? The person whose product is on the wagon or the entity. Mm-hmm. So they want to know who they're dealing with from a regulatory standpoint. But when you call, have a spill ready. Hey, I'm so-and-so with whatever company. I actually service this lane regularly that, this load is posted on. And I'm curious, can you tell me the rate? and just start a conversation. Will you get the first time, will you get the beginner's luck? Probably not. They're probably going to be closer to 15 or 20% of the cut versus 8 or 10. But start that conversation, build that relationship. When you build this, AI is not taking over either end of this industry. Relationships between people is what makes business. Build relationships. That's the begin and end of higher rates, higher load offerings. If somebody knows you, you have a service reputation with them, you're going to get the business. Then you don't have to call. Then the loads are coming to you.
That's good. I can remember back in my shipper days at Bartlett, I would post a load out there, and I'm not exaggerating. Sometimes I get a call from maybe even a trucker I kind of knew or whatever, but sometimes they would call and be like, "Hey, what's the crappy rate on this?"
Well, that's a good way not to get a good rate. If it was me, okay, you want a crappy rate? I'm going to give you a crappy rate.
But like it was started off just like already, and again, not that like, but it was hard to be like, oh my God, like, hey, how are you?
Respect. Talk to somebody. The old golden rule: talk to somebody with the same level of respect that you expect to be treated, because that's a two-way street too. If a broker, which I don't get into that very much, but if a broker or a shipper gets kind of crappy with me, oh, well, you know what? We don't have any trucks available, no capacity.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but check with us some other time. That's a two-way street.
Yeah.
So, in trucking, there's going to be crappy rates. Grain, as I oftentimes grumble about different merchandisers in the grain and fertilizer segments. They'll offer you, this is $6 per loaded mile, but the average cost, bare bones, not factoring in the actual equipment cost to operate that truck 1 hour is still $120 or better an hour. And bare bones cost to run it 1 mile down the road.
So you're talking about like probably this is like a short load. I mean, it's showing $6 a mile, but like it's 10 miles.
You got 5 hours in a load and they're paying you $250. It's a loss. It's a $250 loss. And we've had some pushback, but we're sorry, we got to decline that. We can't do it, And then, a mile down the road, $228 to $235 is the cost to roll that truck down the road, the operating cost. That does not include the extra, we'll do a little mental math here, extra 40 to 60 cents per mile to buy that truck and trailer. So you add that in there and you're pushing $3 a mile still. Cost.
And you're basing that on a 500-mile day?
I'm basing that on an any mile day.
Okay.
But in terms of when you get into the extremely short hauls, you have to look at it by the hour, the time you're putting in that load. Because an hour, 60 miles an hour is an hour of the truck, and a truck sitting somewhere is an hour on the truck. It may not be burning as much fuel, but $120 an hour, especially if you're paying somebody to get in that truck, the average workers' comp rate is between 10 and 14%, sometimes higher if you got a couple of claims. So if I want to pay you $100 an hour, or I want to pay you $100, I got to pay 14 cents or $14, 10% of that to the workers' comp insurance company for every 100.
Oh, wow.
So, and if you get lucky and you get a little lower rate, it's still $7 or $8. And the other, and that's for hopper.
Yeah.
Hopper is a labor-intensive segment, so it has a higher workman's comp rate. If you were to do vans, it's dramatically less because most of that's no touch. It's 4 or 5%. So hopper has a higher cost just to put a driver in that truck.
Yeah, super interesting.
So
going back, and we'll kind of tail off and end with this. So just talking about communication. When you're looking on the load board, or when you're going to make that step to reach out to a shipper or a freight broker on a load, the thing I want to push and get across the fence here is be very be very communicative, let them know who you are, let them know the service that you provide, because like you want to be able to stand out above and beyond. You want to be positive and sincere about it. But again, you are selling your service to that company, even if it's just an introduction.
Well, BRB, we're blessed. I've been in trucking directly since 97. We have the best dispatcher in the world. As she builds a rapport. But before she makes that phone call, she does her homework to see how many miles it is to service that lane for that load and what's available at the other end to bring that truck back to home market.
Oh, wow.
We're a small company. We cannot afford to have trucks strung out all over the company for the whole week or a weekend. We have to. So when we're surging a truck out somewhere, we're having to plan on getting that truck back as fast as we can within legal limits. So do your homework. Know what it's going to cost you for that entire turn, so you can, if you can't get your preferred rate, you can get a rate that you're not losing your rear end. And like we're a hybrid company. We have owner operators and company drivers. If we try to give an owner-operator a rate that's a losing rate, they're going to no, I'm not going to do that. But so then you don't have the capacity. You committed to a load you can't, or a lane and a load you can't service because the rate's too low. So one, do your homework, know what you have to have. If that broker will not come off that rate, then look for something else, or look for a different lane, because some lanes pay better than others. Texas is a hard market to get out of. We always kind of, at BRB, we kind of say we do the other things that people can't or won't do. So, when you spend a decade or two specializing at that, you build these relationships to get things that other carriers can't. And again, it comes down to relationships, respect, and communication.
Love it. Love it. That's awesome. Jesse, before I let you go, man, you are studying the market all the time. We talked about this just on the very beginning, but what are you looking at, or what should people be looking at? You're really the next, this next year in their operation. What would be your words of encouragement for them to kind of keep a pulse on and stay tuned with?
This is not much different than when we talked in October. Cash. Preserve your cash. Cut your expenses. And when you're evaluating your financial picture, don't go by your instinct. Go by what your financial reports are doing. I think it was Martin Emil. I never can remember his name. The first thing any business owner or even owner-operator or even a company driver driving a company truck, look at your P&L or your checkbook versus your bills. Know where you stand financially. Know what you can do, know what you need to do, and know what you must do, and know what you can get away without. So for the remainder, we're just approaching the end of the second quarter or the midpoint. Just maintain your cash levels. Cash is everything. A lot of times, hey, I'm going to buy this. I got the money for it. If you can finance it, if the interest rate isn't too hard and heavy, and if it's not overloading your income to debt ratio, finance it. You can always pay it off in total next year.
Yeah.
Preserve your cash levels.
Awesome. So good. Well, again, hey, thank you for coming to the Bulk Freight Conference and speaking. I know that took a lot of your time and energy. Thanks for, again, making the hour-plus drive up here to be in the BulkLoads studio. What do you think of our little backdrop here?
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Very awesome.
Yeah. Awesome. Cool. Jesse, thanks for coming on. Appreciate you.
Likewise.
Yep. Tyler, hopefully you kind of got the same, content or thoughts that Jesse was portraying there about Prime specifically. But it was interesting when you really look at the volume they have, if you look at the bulk space as a whole, it's still just a small little, just a fraction of a percent of volume if we're looking at the bulk space.
Yeah. And that's why I think a lot of our members and a lot of owner operators, a lot of them are kind of nervous with them getting into it, but a lot of them are like, dude, we've seen this before. Like, it's not going to affect me or my company. It was good to hear Jesse lay that out, and he got worked up. Like he was on fire about it.
Well, you've been here long enough, BulkLoads. it's no different for us when we see another competitor, even on a load board perspective, getting in or similar like products, factory,
Yep.
TMS, like we get fearful as well. So it's the natural tendency to do that, and you can't be blindsided. But man, look at that competition as a advantage, I guess I should say. So look at it, hey, what can I learn from this? But how can I set myself apart? And that's where Jesse and I want to just, before we kind of end on that, this second part of that conversation was, hey, what do you learn from here? But how do you really set yourself apart? How do you, when you're responding on load postings on the load board, how do you look different than everybody else? How do you, instead of just saying, what's the rate? How do you say, hey, this is so-and-so, I want to earn your business. I want to tell you a little bit more about me, but really, selling yourself to shippers. Because at the end of the day, they're the customer, really. They're paying you for the service. So think about it in that sense. So I think I know it's easier said than done, but man, when you interact with customers on the load board or potential new customers that you want to do business with, how are you presenting yourself and how are you being professional and how are you going to stand apart?
Yeah. Sometimes those small things are easy to forget. Like sometimes whenever you're in the moment,
what's the rate?
Yeah. What's the rate? Yeah. You don't even think about it, but yeah, it's just the small things that are so important to these brokers and shippers, and it's what they actually look for. Yeah.
And we said this at our conference. We all have to win if we're all going to stay in business.
Everybody's got to eat.
Yeah. It's not a zero sum. It's not one winner, one loser. We all have to work together. Rachel and I, back in our Bartlett days, we always had that motto, like everybody's got to win here. It's got to be fair to all. Otherwise we're not going to survive.
Yeah.
Awesome. So, what else before we head out of here?
Jared, we got some new hats coming in next week.
Oh yeah. Yeah. You sent me the schemes and we actually have some cool different colors.
Yeah. Yeah. We went with a couple different options this time and they're a couple different colors. I'm excited for them. Joe actually kind of helped out and was like, dude, we need to do this. We need to, go with this color scheme. So they're going to be in next week and we want to give some out. So if you're watching this podcast on YouTube, if you want a hat, just simply comment on this YouTube video that you want a hat or just something you like about the episode. We will reach out to you and get you a hat. I actually had somebody message in on Facebook this morning and was like, how do we buy some of your hats? We're not going to charge you guys. We will send you one for free. You just got to contact us.
Yeah. What I love about these new hats, these are like the XL, like they fit my huge melon so much better. So you got a smaller head, but like these are the actual trucker hats.
Yeah.
And they're nice. So yeah. Awesome. Anything else?
I don't think so. I think we're always going to, right now we're just in a time where we're really trying to nail down our content. We had a great meeting yesterday with Joe.
Hopefully you're going to mention this.
Yeah. One thing that, we're really trying to focus on is getting quality content out there for you guys to see. But the only way you guys can see it is if you subscribe to our YouTube channel and you actually follow us on Facebook and our social media. So it doesn't take a whole lot of time. We're not, asking for anything special. We just want you to hit that subscribe button. That way, whenever we're getting ready to go into the season of really cool content, you guys are notified to get to see it first.
Yeah. And speaking of, I think we said this in the last podcast, Joseph actually, especially we've tasked him to be on the road really 50% of the time, getting footage from companies and all that. So man, we would love to come out there and film you. I know people are just like, that's not me or whatever. Like, trust me, this can be beneficial for your business. This is content that you can get out there. We'll market to our audience, showing your company. So shippers, brokers will see that information. And again, trust me, it will pay dividends on your end. And there's no cost other than your time. If you can give us an hour or two. But if you can message us direct or put a note in the comments below here and we'll reach out to you and we'll schedule that visit. So it's not a big lift at all. And we can meet you where you're at. If you're on the road going somewhere, man, we can meet you out there, do probably an hour of filming and a couple interviews, and we'll push that content out. And then you can even use it for your own social media. Yep, exactly. And if you're curious, like, hey, what does this look like? Go on our YouTube channel right now. And I think the most recent one we did was the Tri-State Commodities video. So look at their company video, and that's kind of what we're trying to do. We just want to highlight your company and showcase you guys and what you're doing in this industry. Yeah, and speaking of, we're going to have them on the podcast coming up here in a couple weeks. Nice. So yeah, it was a really good one. I don't want to talk too much about it, but yeah, I got the grandpa, 97-year-old. The head honcho. Yeah, to come on, and man, there's a lot of wisdom there. So, I bet. Cool. Well, as always, when we before we head out of here, we want to first off, if you have a prayer request, send it to me. I got one this past week. It was a company; they've been with us forever. They're out of West Virginia, but anyways, they're saying that they're suffering. They can't make cash flow, and thinking about closing their business. So we are praying for you out there if you're listening here. But if you do have a prayer request, doesn't matter, small or big, send it to us. We will pray over that, and God does answer prayers. We firmly believe He's a good God. When we petition our prayers to Him, He will answer those prayers. Maybe not in the fashion we want to receive them or like to, but God is in complete control. So I'll close this out today. Heavenly Father, we thank you for today, Lord. We thank you that you give us the opportunity that we get to serve this industry, that we're not required, but we have, that you've chosen us to serve farmers, agriculture, agribusinesses, any bulk, industrial, Lord, that we have the opportunity to interact with shipping companies, brokerages, carriers every day and represent you more than anybody. But Lord, I just pray a blessing over our audience, the people listening to this podcast, Lord, and the greater audience of the bulk and ag industry, Lord, that you be with them, Lord, Lord, that you show favor to them, and Lord, that you bless them, Lord, that you show them the light and the way. Lord, be with us in this time, be with our carriers as they're out on the road traveling, and give them safety. In your heavenly and precious name, amen. Amen. Thank you, as always, for listening to the BulkLoads Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe, and as always, God bless.